Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. We're really excited to have you join the podcast, the Elders Podcast. Today we have an exciting guest, George Kegoro, who's here to speak to us about his journey in the human rights sector and to share with us a fascinating story about how the Makonde, a community that lives in the coastal region of Kenya, got citizenship between 2016 and 2017. George will tell us about his credentials. I know he has a long list of credentials, but I'll just allow him to share with us his journey and to let us and to share with us this fascinating story of how the Makonde got the citizenship. Welcome, and it's such an honor to have you on the podcast, George. Karibu.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
So tell us, it would be really interesting for our audience to just know about who you are, how you started your journey in the development sector, in the human rights sector, and what inspired you. What are the points in your life that you feel were pivotal for you joining, the human rights, being a human rights activist, and, just wanting to, I guess, transform Kenya.
Okay, thank you very much. I find it very difficult to talk about myself. So let me talk about the things that were happening in my formative years. So I joined the University of Nairobi in the late 1980s, and Kenya was still a one-party state. And there was very, very significant political agitation against one-party rule. So there was a famous trial, the case against George Anyona.
Really tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, George Anyona, who has since died, was a very iconic political figure in the country. He had been in detention without trial repeatedly, and was a very, very strong critic of the political establishment. Then when I was at the university, Anyona, together with Njeru Kadhangu, then there was Professor Yugi, and there was a fourth person, I think Ngodho. They were charged with sedition. It was a very, very politically high profile and extremely charged trial. I was a law student, so at the University of Nairobi. So we would attend the case every day. Basically, also that meant skipping classes and just being caught and follow that case and so on.
Why were you following the case? Why was it interesting to you to follow the case?
I mean, as a high school student, I had been interested in public affairs, politics. I would read newspapers. I was aware of the fact that things were not going right in the way that the newspaper and media was covering things. So fast forward, when I get to university, I've become really aware of the forces that are operating in society. And then this arrest happens of George Anyona and the others. And Paul Mwite, at the height of his powers as a lawyer, was the lead defense lawyer. So what happened, and what used to happen those days with those political trials, is there would be like a million lawyers in court defending the accused. There would be a massive solidarity and mobilizing by the lawyers. And then Paul Mwite was sort of the leader of the defense team. There was a prosecutor, Philip Murgo, who is now a senior lawyer. He was then a very young lawyer himself, but he was the prosecutor of the four on behalf of the Attorney General. He was in an extremely difficult position because these other guys were giving him a very, very hard time, and it was not a very popular place to be in terms of the courtroom. There was a magistrate, Mr. Mabele, who was very uninvolved in the trial. He seemed very fair, he seemed very patient. There was massive international media presence throughout the case. So it was a huge political spectacle. And so we followed the case. Then it came to judgment. We were in court. The court was packed that day. Family was there. The families of the 4 accused persons came. So what turned, the trial turned on what meaning to be given to a piece of paper, I remember, that had written, that was written, I think, Rubia and Matiba, something like
Yes,
that.
yes.
And so that, just the 2 names on a piece of paper was the case built around the fact that you can't have these names and be meeting in a bar somewhere in Nairobi West. You must have been meeting there to plan to bring down the Kenya government. The evidence was extremely flimsy. And then Mabele had given the impression that he was a fair magistrate. Paul Mwita had done a fantastic job in dismantling the prosecution, and everybody expected an acquittal. So on the judgment day, we were all there. The judge reads his judgment. The magistrate, he reads his judgment, and he convicts the accused persons. Wow. And then he sentences them to very long jail terms, I remember. And I knew some of the family members, especially Anyona's family members. Some of them were in university with us at that time. So I used to see them around. We were not friends, but you know them, this is so-and-so's family. Yes. So I remember they were in court and people broke down and they were wailing uncontrollably, family. And that represented for me the sense of injustice. And it felt like this magistrate has waited until the last moment to show his hand. And I guess that's the moment that radicalized me, like crystallized my interest in public affairs, my interest in justice, my interest in human rights. So Anyona and group were sentenced to jail terms for nothing.
Yes.
And off to prison they went, and back to college I went. Around the same time, I think something else that was going on which was important was the publication by Gitobi Manyara, the Nairobi Law Monthly.
Yes.
It used to come once every month. And it basically was a collection of all the big developments, oppositional stories. This is what is going on. It would depict the government in a particular, it would a searchlight around what's going on in the government, that kind of thing. There were other publications like Society by Pius Nyamora. There was Beyond magazine that was run by Bidan Bugwa. So those were the things we were reading. The Nairobi Law Monthly, on the Fridays when we expected it to come, we would be camping at the gate for, which looked like hours. We were waiting for, and then often the copies would be sold out in minutes. There was a guy would come in a bicycle, riding on a bicycle, with carrying copies and copies of the Nairobi Law Monthly, and we are standing there. We are running to get the copy before they run out at the University of Nairobi gate, Parklands campus. So that sort of became, that was my journey. So there were colleagues also that I don't think I had sort of the greatest political consciousness at that time, but I had colleagues who did and who would talk about these things in ways that sort of also were in the process making me understand more clearly what the problem was with the country and what needed to be done, and so on and so forth. Around the same time, that's when we have the first Sabasaba. We go to Kamukunji with my friend the Rastas, and that's the Jaramogi is there. and Bahamaris and all those icons. There was the Mzega Shoka, and and then there is Chaos in Majengo. I mean, that place, because it's right next to Majengo there. Then we are running away because we don't know. I mean, police come and people are scattered, and I run into Majengo myself. I don't know the area, get lost. So anyway, I finally find myself back in town, and so those were I guess the key developments in my time that made it like preordained me towards the choices I would end up making about my life. And if I move a little fast forward, I finished my studies. People were going into private practice. After that, I didn't feel that is what I wanted to do myself. I ended up in the government. Took a role in the office of the Attorney General. It was the Law Reform Commission, where I was doing sort of legal reform research and supporting legal reform research for purposes of law reform. Then after that, I ended up got a job at the Law Society of Kenya. The Law Society had been sort of the bastion, the leadership of all the oppositional forces of the time. So when you get into the Law Society, you are in the heart of the beast of the opposition. So that, I think, became my journey. And there at the Law Society, I was hired by Willie Mutunga, who was the outgoing chair of the society. He had been to detention without trial, in an earlier phase of his life. So you're working with the great Willie Mutunga, and so the society is sort of this space where everything oppositional revolves around. Maina Kiai had been there. They had started the 4Cs movement, the Coalition for Constitutional Change. So that became the thing that we were supporting at the Law Society Secretariat, and that's basically part of my journey into what has happened up to now.
It's so fascinating. So the thing that I've just found so fascinating is how the information that you would consume would shape so much of your, at university level, would shape so much of maybe your awareness of what is happening, and kind of forms your ideas on what you should be participating in or not. I'm not sure if maybe it was something that was a trend at the time at the university, or it was just there were people who were already conscious and who were already willing and interested in understanding what was happening, or was it because the political climate was such that you were forced by your circumstances to be politically conscious?
I don't know. People end up in very different places, and I think part of it, I think it's a function of two things. Sometimes it's just a coincidence. You end up in a place and that shapes your life, or things happen around you and they sort of pull you in, and that sort of becomes, it crystallizes in a way that becomes your life and your choice. So the choice happens without you really thinking about it, and life goes on day one, and before you know it, it's 10 years and so on and so forth. That's one way. Another way becomes people have a decision that they've made. They want to do this for themselves, and that becomes their choice. What I know is from early on, I just didn't, because the preponderant number of us who left university, the largest number, everybody sort of was going into private legal practice. I knew I didn't want to do that for some reason. My instinct was, that's not what I want to do with myself. I just thought that I felt that there can be another way of contributing to society with my training and with my skills that is sort of more general and more generalist in approach, but that still uses the same skills that people were. It felt to me like going into practice was restrictive in a
Yes.
way and wasn't going to give me a chance to be useful, although I didn't know what being useful meant, and I would continue discovering that over the years. I remember my father, who has now slept, he became very concerned because he would listen to his friends, and would sort of come to me and like, why is your son not practicing like all the other lawyers? So he would come and like, are you making a mistake? Because my friends are telling me that when you're armed with the kind of knowledge and skills you have, people go to practice, they go into courts and so on and so forth. And it's like, yeah, I'm fine. Dad, I'm fine. What I do, I enjoy it, and I feel it's making it's having meaning and it's making a difference, and I'm fine. And thank you very much for your concern. And I felt he felt assured. And throughout his life, he was a very, very, very big supporter of the choices I had made about my life and the things I wanted to do with it.
That's fascinating because I share the same journey, because I was also at I went to University of Nairobi School of Law, and practice was also not for me. So you've articulated it, and I've never had, that's the same experience I had, where I felt that I didn't feel that was the space I wanted to contribute my skills and knowledge. And so I veered off, and there was a lot of concern, of course, from my family as well.
Wow, you went into such, now here you are.
I know.
In journalism. Much later, because I also then started writing. Much later in life, I would pick up that habit. It's actually a war. Writing is war, or journalism is war, because you annoy so many people, or even as you uplift and please so many others. But so much later, then I would start writing a newspaper column.
Yes, I remember I used to read it.
Yeah, so that was fun, but it was also war. It was many, many things. I can talk about my experience as a columnist for days, and no dull moment. It was just one of those out of this world experience. But it was a massive, massive privilege. It's a massive power that one has when also you develop a readership, a followership that I guess some of them look forward to reading you. Some people don't like you, obviously, and I've met people who didn't like my writing. I've had threats on me because of my writing. I've had pressure, massive pressure exercised on me. What are those things you are writing? I've got it wrong sometimes and got my facts twisted and been so embarrassed. What is that I wrote? Gosh, if the ground could swallow me, and it's out, it's gone, and you just know you messed up. But on the whole, it was very, very, very fulfilling when it lasted. It made a massive difference, I felt. It contributed to shaping public opinion. And then it also contributed in a sense because you end up then becoming, whether or not you like it. I've always thought I was sort of a private person. Nobody knows me, and I like it that way, kind of thing. Then you realize that view that you are a private person it's a bubble, because people know you. If people read you, then they know you and they will follow you, and you have a group of fans. There would be people who sort of like give you feedback that feels nice and you feel well touched, but it balances out with the fact that at any given time, because if you're going to do meaningful writing, you're going to have people who support it and who feel this is good, and you're also going to have some backlash.
And critics.
Yes, exactly.
And well, thank you. I feel like you came to encourage me and the team because, I also think I'm a private person. We were actually talking about it yesterday. I was saying, I'm just a private person. I don't want. So, I mean, just hearing that, and also just the encouragement of not fearing to do it because of critics, right? That, if you have something to say, just say it. And there are times, and I mean, it's a human experience. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you have good feedback. Sometimes you don't. And, it's just keeping on doing it because I think at the end of the day, you have something meaningful to contribute. It's, I think, the contribution that is useful. And I'm actually tracing that part of your life back to your conversation about just reading and consuming all these articles and journals when you're in university and how that shapes. And so I guess with your writing in the column is like a kind of paying it forward because, Honorable Getobu was, passing on some information because he was writing and sharing all these experiences. And then now years later, here you are.
I felt Gitobo has been a larger than life personality in the Kenyan sort of legal media space. I felt like straddling human rights, media, myself. Media people they have never regarded me as one of them because I have no media training.
Yes.
I have something against them for that. I mean, I'm in your space. I write in your papers. I mean, but they have never accepted me. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I just feel that using one set of skills and being in one world and sort of transposing it or merging it or leveraging what you have into the next world. But also what I feel is also the public needs writing that sort of relies on the law, but that is done accessibly. It's very simply. What I tried to do when I wrote my column is just also write for ordinary people, write extremely simply and explain this is what this means, and I mean this is the background, or this is the context, and then this is the information that you need to have, or this is what is wrong with the situation I'm describing based on the background and that kind of thing. And I just felt that it was appreciated.
So maybe you can tell us about your journey into the Human Rights Commission and specifically around the time, what influenced the commission to be interested in the story of the Makonde community, and particularly the statelessness and their journey towards being getting citizenship.
So long before I joined the Kenya Human Rights Commission, a friend of mine who had contacts with the Mozambican embassy in Nairobi used to talk about the Makonde. And the Makonde had been agitating. They had been in this country for a long time. So the Makonde arrived in Kenya in the 1920s as right at the start of the colonial experience, and they were coming in to work along the coastline in the plantations. They were providing plantation labor for in the sugar industry that was being established, and they came from Mozambique. And so much later, when I've been working myself. As I said, my friend used to have contacts within the Mozambican embassy in Nairobi.
Yes.
And there would be conversations about what do you do with this Makonde who arrived here years ago.
About how many were they?
They would be in there more than 5,000.
Wow. Okay.
They've lost their way because the ones who arrived originally, some have died off. The survivors are few and old or elderly, and the children who have been born here can't find their way back to Mozambique. They've lost their
their roots and their traces.
Yeah. And then, but they're still not accepted in this country. That is classical statelessness. The first part of it being you are socially disconnected, but the other part of it, the legal side of things. In 1963, when at independence, Kenya decides for itself who belongs and who doesn't belong.
Okay.
In the way the constitution is written, the constitution has a long sort of articulation of who is a citizen and who is not. And the articulation of citizenship is around the ethnic communities in Kenya as we know them, the more established 41 or so ethnic communities. So the Makonde are not one of those. So because they're not one of those, they don't enter the list of citizenship groups. And they also don't, and they can't go back practically to wherever their ancestors had come from. When we start as the Kenya Human Rights Commission supporting the Makonde story, it is many years, more years later. It is like 80 years since their first arrivals in the country. So that's a very long time. And the problem doesn't go away because the numbers that arrived were small, but because they are increasing, the numbers are increasing over the years, you can't wish the problem away. If 100 years from now, there will be how many Makondes in the country? Maybe 100,000. So the problem will be 100,000 stateless people because we derive documents from our parents, and if our parents don't have registration documents, they can't pass on those to us. So that is the situation that I found when as the Kenya Human Rights Commission, we started supporting the Makonde. There were partners at the coast that we had been working with who had been carrying that story of the Makonde, and it was sort of it had reached a dead end. It was not moving forward. So we came in. So
basically, what you're saying is that they had already started this kind of documentation process to help them get documentation.
No. They had started agitating.
Okay.
But that agitation had reached a dead end, and one of the problems was an imagined fear that the Republic of Mozambique would take offense over the fact that Kenya was taking over their citizens, which is the story, which is the linkage with the Mozambican embassy here.
Yes.
But the thing is, if you give them these people, they have got no use for them. They can't. You tell them, bring a bus and take them. Where would they take them?
Because I mean, they've not been in Mozambique for what? I mean, of course,
they were not born there.
They were not born there.
They were not born there. They have no relationship with that country other than the fact that their ancestors were from there. And on whose land, if you want to settle them in that where on whose land?
Yes.
They don't know anything about that country. But they're not accepted in this country either. But what it does when you don't have citizenship, which means you can't get an ID. If you can't get an ID, you can't open a bank account, you can't do M-Pesa, you can't buy land, you can't access healthcare, you can't take your kids to school. So it is a very dehumanizing situation to be in. So when we got involved and we started engaging the UNHCR, which has the global mandate around refugees and stateless persons. So one thing that should be said, the Makonde were not alone as a stateless category. There were other groups that arrived in this country during the colonial period and have different journeys and different experiences, and all of them ending up in being stateless. One of those other groups was a group of Shona people who arrived only in 1963 at the turn of independence, but also ended up here stateless. But they came much later, but they had the same. They ended up with the same experience. You've had the Asian community, who whose arrival in this country is much earlier. They arrived before the colonial era, but a large number then was brought in as laborers to support the building of the Kenya-Uganda Railway, but others also doing private migration over the years into the country. But what happened in 1963, when choices about citizenship are being made, the British government then tells the descendants of British, overseas citizens who are largely the Asian community to make a choice whether to take a British citizenship or to retain the Kenyan citizenship. So there was a period when they needed to make that choice. Some did not make the choice because they never got the notice or whatever reason. And some then ended up stateless because the window closed. They couldn't take British citizenship and they were not Kenyan citizens either.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you've had a small group of Asians in a category of statelessness. And we found that as we got involved in this situation, we found that this was the case. But ultimately, this is what you've got to understand. Statelessness is predominantly an expression of powerlessness. You hardly ever find on the African continent, we have had the Europeans who arrived in this continent and who either as colonizers or as traders or as religious, whatever you don't find them in statelessness.
That's true. That's true. I've never thought about it, but you're right. Yeah, they don't.
So ultimately, statelessness is a position of powerlessness. It is particularly African. Everybody else's interests were taken care of when all these big transitions were going on. Everybody's interests were taken care of except the Africans who are native to the continent, but they're the ones who end up, and the statelessness is not just a Kenyan problem. You find it across Africa. You'll find Africans when we did the Makonde, at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, we got a delegation. I got a delegation from the leader of the Maragoli in Uganda. There's a Maragoli community in Uganda who are not accepted there. They are told you don't belong. You belong across. We hear the Ugandan sort of the political posture is the Maragoli are in Kenya. You don't belong here. Go home.
Yeah, but that's because of the artificial nature of what colonialism did, right? Like Africa we didn't have states as we have them now.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone could move wherever, and that's why there's the great migrations across Africa. And you'd stay in your area, and if you needed to move, you'd move to another area as long as you're not, in conflict, or you do have the conflict and you take over. But the thing is, that wasn't the African experience before colonialism. So what happens is you draw these artificial boundaries, and you say, you stay on this side and you stay on this side and you belong here, and we'll give you legitimacy to stay here. Because if you think about our borders, even the Maasai, you'll find the Maasai in Tanzania and you'll find the Maasai in Kenya. You'll find, the people with Ethiopian, heritage on the both sides, Somalis. In Uganda, the same thing. So it's artificial. That's
true. That's one factor, the factor of the arbitrariness of the boundaries. But also the second factor is how colonialism, including settler colonialism and the colonial labor arrangements, extraction of labor arrangements, made Africans then have to move across boundaries sometimes in long distances in search of work. So you have people moving into, when they discovered that diamonds and gold, you have Africans pouring into South Africa to offer their labor and traveling over long distances. So that's that kind of migration that is sort of based on labor or the search for jobs. It ended up producing far more traumatic experiences because people were then moving in large numbers very quickly.
Yes.
The more organic forms of migration, where maybe you're moving for pasture and across places that end up being outside of the boundaries, the colonial boundaries, it would tend to be, of course, it ends up also contributing to the statelessness, but people move less dramatically than those who are moving to say, being told now there's a plantation in a place and they're employing people, go and get yourself a wage in that place, and people then end up moving into places where they're minorities.
Yes.
One of the other groups that we ended up in a later phase, whose stateless case we supported was there's a Rwandese group here, there's a Burundi group here. They came during the colonial period as laborers.
Oh, wow.
Some ended up in the tea plantations in Kericho, and some ended up at the coast as well. The numbers are small, but they are here and they've had the same experience. So it was when we resolved the Shona case after the Makonde that these other groups were also resolved together with the Kenyan, the descendants of British overseas citizens. So we've had small groups. There was even a Ghanaian family, I remember, that ended up here and ended up stateless. So people have, on this continent, I think the point to make, I've already made it, is that there's an underclass connection with how the problems of statelessness have manifest themselves on the African continent.
So what happened when the cases of the Makonde came to the Kenya National Commission, to the Kenya Human Rights Commission?
So when we became aware of the Makonde and their problems, we then started working. We formed a coalition of actors that was made up of the county government of Kwale, Governor Mvurya, and then local civil society organizations that had been supporting them, that also had a trusting relationship with them, and we came in as sort of this national entity that was that was leading the process. So with the county government of Kwale, there was agreement that this situation needs to be resolved. They passed a motion in the county assembly supporting the end of statelessness for the Makonde. That was an important political gesture. And then we said, to draw attention to their situation, we would organize a trek for them to Nairobi. And the county government was going to support the trek by trying to smooth and open a way for us to meet President Uhuru Kenyatta when we got to Nairobi. That was the understanding. So we had very elaborate preparations, and those preparations ended up in, we have the D-Day, we are here, we brought the buses from Nairobi, we do prayers at a place called Makongeni, which is the sort of their center in Kwale. We have prayers, the Muslim prayers, Christian prayers by Father Dolan, and the county government, the county secretary is present, and we are flagged off. And the plan was, because a lot of the people are elderly, from Nairobi, from Kwale to Nairobi is a very long distance. We would people would drive in the sort of through the Savo areas where the population is low, but in the shopping centers and towns, we would walk as a way of drawing attention to ourselves. We had attired ourselves appropriately, everybody in a red t-shirt that had a certain writing drawing attention to the Makonde and their problems and so on and so forth. So the county government was present. I've said that's an important thing to say.
So they were matching. They were
there. They gave a speech in the morning to say, when you get to Nairobi, we've talked to the president, and we will see how you get to. Somehow it was not clear how they were going to give us access to State House, but
you were matching with the hopes
in the hope that the county government was going to give us access to State House in Nairobi. So when we left Makongeni, within about 6 to 8 kilometers, we were arrested.
Oh, wow.
The county,
So before you say that, how many were you? Were you a group of about how many?
So there would have been a group of about 200 people.
Wow.
In all, about 200 people. We had about maybe 300. We had about, I think, four buses. And so when we get to this place, we find Nelson Marwa, who was the regional commander for the coast. He has come from Mombasa. He has heard there's a group that is causing trouble in his region, and he's got a long convoy of heavily armed police, and they've put a blockade on the road, and they say, you're going nowhere. So Marwa didn't know us. We didn't know Marwa. I'd never seen Marwa other than on TV myself, and I just thought that as the leader of this group, I need us to engage Marwa and tell him that, get to understand what his concerns were. So I approached Marwa and told Marwa, my name is George Kegoro. I am the executive director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. I'm the leader of this group. And Mr. Marwa, actually, I don't fear you. He needed to know that. And that kind of startled him. The people who had prayed with us in the morning and waved us off were now on Marwa's side, and they were the ones who had come to arrest us.
Okay, all right.
So what he had done is he had hired a hall on near the road and said he wants us to go into that hall so that he can address us. And persuade us that we must go back, the Makonde must go back home. And they're like, you are very presumptuous. We didn't have you in our plans. You've even hired a hall. And we just said, we are not coming to no hall, and we are going to Nairobi. But what I feared at that time was if the police clobber these elderly people, then that's going to be disastrous, obviously, for us. And I remember calling a board member, Maina Kiai. He was in New York. I called him from the side of the road, and I described the situation to him, and he said, the first thing is do no harm. Make sure that none of these people come to harm as a result of the confrontation you're having with the authorities. But secondly, the choice of what needs to be done must be made by the Makonde themselves.
That's powerful.
What they decide. If they want to listen to the government and go back to Makongeni, that's okay.
Yeah.
If they want to go to Nairobi, they make that decision themselves, and you support that decision by telling off the authorities.
That is powerful.
So we then told Marwa, we need to consult among ourselves, and we consulted. The Makonde were clear. They said, tukija kwa maafisi zenu mnatuambia tuende Nairobi. Tukitaka kwenda Nairobi mnatuzuia. Sisi tunaenda Nairobi bana. That's what and the Makonde are the ones who told that to the authorities directly. And the authorities were saying, your crime rates in the crime rates in your area, the lowest in the country. You are law-abiding people. You're not citizens. You're law. So why are you allowing these NGO people to kuwapotoshas? That used to be the word used during the Kanu years, to mislead you. So that kind of thing. And these guys were like, they're not misleading us. They're taking us to where we think we can get help, because we've tried to get help with you people, and that has not worked. So Marwa tried to get us to speak to. He brought a phone to speak to Kaiseri, who was then the Minister for Interior, like, here is the phone, the Kaiseri is on the phone, please speak to him. I was like, I don't want to speak to Kaiseri. He's your minister. You speak to him as we're going to see the president.
Yes.
And then we left that security group there on the side of the road. It was very clear we had embarrassed him, and that this was not the end of the matter. He would have the more would follow. Yes, right.
And they didn't stop you. You continued walking.
So they didn't stop us. We continued walking, and when we got to another point, we found they had regrouped. And now they forced us onto a field. And this is why we had a long conversation with them. And then that result, and then we left them there a second time. And we ended up in Mombasa, which is where we spent the night. I was sure this is not the end of the matter. And I was right, because the following day when we get to Voi, they left us alone the whole day. But when we got to Voi, then they arrested us.
Oh,
the whole group was arrested and taken to Voi police station, which was the best thing that ever happened to us.
Okay, why?
Because then it drew attention to the group.
Of course.
Because the country had no idea who these were. But what was trending now on social media is that there's a group of Makonde, whoever those might be, who have been arrested, rounded up in large numbers, and we hear they're elderly and that kind of. So we were making calls, and then everybody was making calls, and that ended up drawing attention to this group and the country's attention. Like, what do they want? What have they done? Why have they been arrested? So that's what, up to that point, then we are like, we wouldn't know it then that this is what, that's the effect it had. But later when we come to review, we're like, we entered the consciousness of the government as a result of the arrest and the pushback that it created on social media.
That is so fascinating, meaning that before the Kenyans had no idea, you were just doing your activities. And this point at the arrest is where that, why are these people being arrested? What do you think that social media did for that issue beyond highlighting? And who who are the people who picked it up? What was the activity and the frenzy happening in that space that caused I guess I'm calling it the tipping point on this issue? So
we had the likes of Boniface Mwangi. Boniface Mwangi would meet us later in Nairobi and was extremely instrumental in another confrontation with the police that we had when we finally got to Nairobi. But people like those who have got sort of big social media accounts, they picked up the issue and started talking about it, because statelessness is difficult to explain to people. What is that? Like, you don't have IDs. When the time comes, as we go and we get ours. So it's very difficult for people to understand that there is a group of people who live here who can't get IDs because they can't get IDs. They are not considered that they belong here, and they are not considered they belong anywhere. So it became throughout the engagement, even the authorities they don't understand the problem they themselves.
Yes,
so you are. The start of any engagement is to tell them what is statelessness.
Yes. Okay, that's interesting.
That's where it starts with even government people. They don't know what statelessness is. So you tell them there are people who this is their journey in life, and this is unlike you who was born in Mumias and Moranga and so on and so forth, and can get the documents of the government. They can't. And they can't get any documents of any government, and they are stuck. And the consequences on them are the following. And you just give them, and then they realize, so why can't we resolve the problem? So what is the solution? The solution has to be, you've got to make a political decision that these people belong here. And once you make that decision, obviously what happens is that the political leaders fear if we make this decision are there, some unintended consequences that we are inviting, then you start talking to them and tell them, no, they're already here, so they're not going away. Whether or not you give them documents, they are not going away. So you'd better give them documents that gives them a start in life, that gives them a chance to establish themselves and live independently. If they can't live independently, they become a burden on their neighbors. So wherever you have a large stateless community around the country, like the Makonde in the coast and the Shona and Kino areas in Nairobi, the neighbors want them to get documents because they become an economic burden on their neighbors.
Please explain that. Like, how does that manifest? How does the burden to the neighbor show up?
So if you're in Kino here in 2024 or 23, you are a woman, you're pregnant, because you don't have documents, you'll give birth at home. Once you give birth at home, who is going to take care of your baby? All those things. You don't have a job. You can't establish a meaningful livelihood because that is livelihoods are tied to establishing who you are, your identity. We never think about it that way, but at every point when you're dealing, when you're transacting with other people, everybody's trying to establish who you are. And for them, they can never establish who they are, so they can't transact. So including transactions to do with just being family. So you've given birth, you go to hospital, you can't go to hospital, so you give birth at home. Once you give birth at home and you don't have ways of taking care of your family, of your children, your neighbors, one way or the other, have to chip in with supporting you, and they support through your illnesses. They support you through every situation. It's like having an unemployed member in your family when you are working yourself. One way or the other, the burdens associated with unemployment are borne by the employed members of the family. It is exactly the same
and
way.
You can imagine now, this is not one person. This is hundreds of people.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. So when you were arrested and you were in Voi, what happened that you were released?
So we don't know what happened. They must have had their consultations. Then we were released. And then over the next 2 days, we were on the road, marching and sleeping in towns. And then we ended up in Nairobi. I believe that was day 4. That would have been around lunchtime of day 4, since we had been flagged off. We were filthy. We had been on the road for a very long time. It was so. So another group here, we had organized a group in Nairobi that was similarly attired to receive the group that was the triumphant group that arrived in the city.
Yes.
So this Nairobi group they assembled at the Freedom Corner, and they started walking into this other group along the highway, and the two groups melted into each other. It was a powerful moment. People were sort of embracing like long lost brothers and sisters, and they were strangers. They don't know each other. Everybody had the same red attire. So when we get to Nairobi, we go to, now the group has become much larger, and we are extremely noticeable. We've stopped the traffic because we are walking on the road. We go around Parliament buildings. We go to Nyayo House notices, and people are sort of we are singing. We've got megaphones and so on and so forth. We are sort of a spectacle to the authorities. Who are those? What do they want? I think word must have gone that because when we get to Nyayo House, the Director General of Migration comes down, Mr. Kihalangwa.
Oh, so the march was to immigration.
To immigration. We are here. You're the one who issues documents. Sort us out. So Mr. Kihalangwa comes down, and we didn't know him ourselves. He speaks to us. I speak to him. He says he wants to us to to give him a few minutes to get the minister down or to address us, or to get the minister to address us, Mr. Nkaiseri. We didn't believe him. We thought he was buying time to whatever, to assemble the police or something to clobber us. So we marched on. We left Nyayo House. We marched on to Uhuru Park. And when Mr. Kialangwa came down a second time, we were gone. So he started chasing after us, and he had fallen, and he's dusty now a bit. And when we got to Uhuru Park, we find the police had been assembled, and they were telling us, now you can't go to State House because you were going to State House. But then by that time, it's like 5 p.m., so high traffic around that Serena area. So we are really a nuisance. And then from nowhere, Mr. Kaiseri arrives.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, Mr. Kaiseri arrives at the park. And so I approach him. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. I mean, he didn't know me. I knew him, this towering figure. So I just introduced myself. I tell him I'm the leader of the group. And we didn't expect to see him, but we are surprised he's coming. Then he says, I've come to take you to the president.
Oh, wow.
I didn't believe him. So I told him, the best thing is you tell the group yourself. We thought this was a trick. You tell the group yourself. And then I said, I'll get them off the road and into the park, and then you tell them, you address them and tell them that yourself, which is what happened. Kaiseri then addresses the group. He says, I'm taking you to the president. The police who had been attempting to clobber us 1 minute, that's the time when now my friend and colleague Boniface Mwangi played such a big role. He was playing like bad cop, and I was kind of playing the good cop. And the bad cop, really, it was necessary because we needed to maintain our menace as a way of maintaining sort of our courage in the face of all this risk to this elderly group. And my fear the whole time was, if this police decide to clobber these people and there's an incident, we'll never hear the end of it. It would be the most irresponsible thing we would have done to these elderly people. So when Kaiseri addresses them, he's very friendly. He tells them, I've come to take you to the president. He's waiting for you at State House. Whoa. The police come round. They open the way for us. We're driving on the wrong side.
It changes completely.
It changes that minute. We drive through that barrier. They open the barrier into Serena Hotel. We drive up the road. The police clear the highway because it's people are going home, and there's a traffic jam. In no time, we are on the big field. We are being frisked and being sort of prepared to go into the State House proper. And about an hour or so later, we are in State House, and President Uhuru Kenyatta is there, sitting like 5 meters away from me, and the Deputy President then William Ruto is there with him. They had a cabinet meeting that morning. So as we have like filthy, we've been on the road for days. They are clean, power people, kind of thing. And Kaiseri is with them. And then Kaiseri kind of is the one who is speaking. He says, I want 2 speeches, Makonde. It's Makonde speeches. We don't want anybody else. Watu wa human rights I say, we don't mind. We don't have a problem. So the president finally speaks. He says, I'm so sorry for what has happened to your community. I know your community because you used to dance for my father when he was president, and I was a child growing up at State House, Mombasa, and also in when I used to go, when they used to go to Kwale, the group used to entertain the Kenyatta family. Kenyatta promised them citizenship. The first Kenyatta, he didn't give it. Moi had promised them citizenship. He didn't give it. Kibaki promised them citizenship. He didn't give it. Now, it came to Uhuru, and Uhuru told King Kaiseri, I want to give these people citizenship in December when I go to Mombasa. And I want if that I want you to prepare them for that. I want to give them IDs in December when I go to Mombasa. This was to have been August or July, August, I believe.
And this is of which year?
Of 2016.
Wow.
And then he said, if they're not ready for IDs, there'll be trouble. That's what the president said. So immediately, by now it's like 8 o'clock, now going to 9 p.m. We leave State House. These people are very happy. And we put them in the buses. I think they were given a way to go back to Kwale, a small bahasha. Yeah. So they were very happy, and we arranged for them to go back to get onto the buses, and they drove back
on the same day.
Overnight. They didn't spend the night in Nairobi.
Wow.
They went back to Kwale.
They actually achieved their goal.
What they wanted. So in the coming weeks, we started now working with the Ministry of Interior needed us. Only us knew who the Makonde were, who they needed to give IDs to fulfill a presidential directive. They didn't know the Makonde themselves.
Yes.
So they needed to work with us. We ended up developing a very close relationship with Mr. Marwa because he needed access to these people. So we started the documentation process, issuing them with birth certificates, because birth certificates are preconditional to the ID themselves.
Yes.
Just also registering them and getting the numbers and so on and so forth. So all that process began, and we became close collaborators with the Ministry of Interior. And when the president went to Mombasa, to Kwale, we were invited to the presidential ceremony to give those ID cards, and we were there. Okay, we never got any recognition at all, because what happened is the government then sort of appropriated the whole thing, and I think what the way in Kaiseri said it was Mheshimiwa Rais, mimi nilisikia kuna watu hapa wanasumbuka sana, ukanituma ukanipatia mabuses niende niwalete kutoka na Mombasa.
Alright.
Nikakuja hapa nikawaleta kwako, ukasema pate citizenship. That is how so we were sort of invisibilized from the story completely, but that's okay.
That's okay, because
but much later we did our own ceremony with the Makonde in Makongeni, just to celebrate the fact that they were now citizens, and we did a plaque. The plaque is in their playground in Makongeni.
Amazing.
And who was our guest of honor? Mr. Nelson Marwa. Mr. Nelson Marwa was our guest of honor. We were very happy. He was very happy with these people. Everybody, we ended up with it ended up being a story with an extremely happy ending. There had been a young man who was being signed up for a football a career by a club in Germany. He couldn't travel.
And he's a Makonde?
He was a Makonde boy who couldn't travel because you can get an ID, which means you can get a passport, which means you can go and pursue your professional job, whatever. So what the president also directed, and they've been practicing since the Makonde were brought into the fold, he gave promises that because you people have been held back for so many years, you'll get a number of bursaries. You'll get quotas in employment. There's not a single Makonde person in the army. We'll give you jobs in the army. We'll give you jobs in the police. All these things where everybody else has a stake, but the Makonde had never gotten a stake. And there has been some kind of outreach and some kind of awareness by the state that there is a historically disadvantaged group here that needs to be supported to come up to some point where everybody else has been or hasn't had the same experience as everybody else. So so that has been the Makonde journey. What it did is then it emboldened us to pick up the case of the Shona.
Yes.
Which is a different case. They live around Kikuyu area. They live around Kino, places very close to Nairobi. And when we picked up that group, the government also now had the sky did not fall.
Yes, there's precedent. Let's say.
Yeah, there's precedent. So the government felt that we could deal with this problem. But also it had an effect, I felt, on President Uhuru Kenyatta. I think there is something about him, because this is a problem you found your father didn't solve it.
Yes.
Then the next two presidents, Moi and Kibaki, didn't solve it either. It could have been very easy for him to say there's probably an unseen complication.
Yes.
Which is why all these other presidents didn't touch this problem.
Yes.
There's something about Uhuru Kenyatta that I think he has a certain level of boldness and a certain level of ability to take risk, because that must have been viewed as risk on the part of the government, which is why they didn't act on it for so long. And with him in office, I think then the government took what they would define as risk in giving the Makonde Kenyan statehood, and then resolving a problem that would still be with us, and then later on building on that, because President Ruto has also now picked another group that we also identified and started working with, the people who live around the coastal towns and coastal regions, who are encountering pushback because they were being told they are Zanzibaris, they are not Kenyans.
The Pemba, is it the
Pemba? Correct.
Yes.
So they're Zanzibaris and Tanzanians, therefore. So there is now sort of political appetite, but there's also understanding of what the problem is. When we started working with the Shona, it resulted in the first ever Shona person going to a university.
Oh, wow.
First ever.
And this is how many years after?
This is from 1963, 60 years.
Wow.
You've been here for 60 years,
and you've never,
none of you has ever gone beyond secondary school. So that young girl, Nozipo, what's her name? Nosizi. Nosizi joined the University of Nairobi to study economics. She's finished. I understand she's got a job in an international organization. So, and there are few now more of their people who have exposure or an opportunity to get a higher education. So with education, with opportunity, with documentation, you can go on with your life.
It kind of unlocks so much that if you're a citizen, you take for granted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you would get the stories of, there was a woman among the Makonde. There was this woman who was telling us, she was a pastor. So she was telling us, nilianzisha kanisa, registered it in the name of a Kenyan, because I don't have documents. So after the thing thrived, the person swindled me and took over my church. So there were stories like that a lot. You start a business, if you're enterprising, you start a business because you can't get registration. You get a local person to be sort of the sleeping partner, or to be the face of the business and registration. Later on down the line, mnakosana because the person makes demands that are unreasonable and starts taking advantage of you because you don't have papers. So yeah, I think that's that was the Makonde story, and the stories that I've built on it for other groups that I feel have gone well. And I think I thank the government that that worked with us in getting this to be possible, but also the communities themselves and the colleagues that we worked with in the civil society movement that have made this possible.
This is amazing. I mean, like, the stories of change are it's just phenomenal. And for me, what the powerful moments were just that the Makonde people made a choice.
Yeah.
And they made a choice to move on. And they're saying that, at the point where you met with Mara, and they said, and you gave them, and that's the thing I think sometimes that development agencies don't do. It's easy for you to feel that you have the power to make the choice for the community. But that was the powerful, because you shifted and you said, you have an opportunity to go back into your safety or into what you know, but you also have this opportunity to move forward. And moving forward, you don't know what lies ahead.
Exactly.
And you make the choice to move forward.
Exactly.
That was really just so powerful. And that, things then kind of unlock even beyond our imagination.
So there's a mzee, he's called Thomas Nguli. He's the leader of the Makonde. So in later years, after we finish the Makonde story, now to sort of also draw attention. So the UNHCR, who are our partner and who are the mandate holder on ending statelessness, we worked with them. They are sort of, because they are a UN organization and an intergovernmental organization, they also have a way they work that is sort of very conservative. They tiptoe around their relationship with the Kenya government. We were having a fairly robust approach ourselves. They didn't know how to deal with us because they're like, you are very bare-knuckled ways of relating with power. Could put us in trouble. We're like, that's okay. We are a local organization. If our demand is not effective, it's not worth making. So an effective demand will probably annoy the authorities, but they will, but it will not be ignored.
Yes.
So later, which was sort of one of the highlights. There are so many beautiful highlights of these stories. Mzenguli, they have everything has been done. We organized for him. There's a big conference in Geneva on addressing global statelessness. We take him to Geneva. He had never left the country.
Wow. And now he has an ID as a passport.
An ID as a passport, and he's speaking in an international meeting about. And it's just an old mzee, villager. He's talking about the experiences of living as a stateless community. So we've had also an international angle. President Uhuru ended up seeing himself sort of as, and we were encouraging him to do that. See yourself as the African champion on ending statelessness. So that would mean you also sensitize to the problem of statelessness. Yeah. So you see, what has happened in Kenya, unlike a lot of other African countries, is we have a near universal registration of persons. In IDs, some countries, the government does not enforce the taking of IDs as strongly as the Kenya government does.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's the case?
Well, just the way we've developed. We also didn't always do it during, it started with Moi, when Moi sort of did a very strong push to get everybody to get an ID. When you get everybody to get an ID, it magnifies the problem of those who can't get IDs. You understand?
Yes.
So in places, when in countries where there's a large group of people, whether they're entitled to registration or not, who don't have it, then the problem is not dramatized. In Kenya, it is particularly dramatized because almost everybody has an ID. Yes. So those who can't access IDs for whatever reason, it becomes dramatic for them. They can't live in this society. When you meet the police, even if casually in the streets, the first thing they ask you, when in any wapi ID. Yeah. That is your first interaction with authorities. When you meet the Shona, they tell you, sisi to tangu we become of age and are going out, you always dress warmly because your encounter with a policeman might land you in a cell because you don't have an ID. You can't, and you don't have an ID, your name is in Ndlovu or one of those Southern African names. So the police will take you and they'll never understand what are you doing in this country? And you speak Swahili and you speak Kikuyu, because they do speak Kikuyu.
Yeah, what?
Yes, they do. They speak perfect Kikuyu because they are born here.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
As what are you doing? I mean, the police can't understand that you are not a fraudster. We've never had this kind of name. You don't have an ID. You say your story yako ni nani. So there are many layers of misunderstanding, and so the Shonas were telling us, sisi tukitoka asubuhi during our stateless years, you carry a warm jacket because you may end up in a cell. It's very easy for you to be in a cell that evening because you don't have identification.
That's so fascinating and so sad, and just such an important story to tell, because I mean, I didn't even know half of those things that you're saying, and just understanding, I mean, how important an ID is in Kenya, to imagine that there are people who have no roots where they immigrated from, and yet cannot, they see themselves, their experience is a Kenyan experience, but they don't have the documentation that helps them to live a full Kenyan experience, and how important an ID is in Kenya. Yeah. And how it gives you an identity, right? Because then it unlocks so many other things for you, as you said, education, healthcare, travel. So even if you wanted to go back, so for instance, even if the Shona wanted to go back to, a country, they wouldn't, because they don't even have the documentation to go.
Exactly.
So you're kind of in limbo.
But also, every human being, I think, inherently wants independence. And you can't live an independent life if you can't access documentation.
Yes,
so independence, if you have it gives you economic independence, it gives you decisional independence. You can migrate because you've got the right to the freedom of movement. The Constitution of Kenya says you have got the freedom to move and settle in any part of the country. It's an illusion if you don't have documentation, because settling in another part of the country, you're going to deal with a landlord maybe, and then the landlord will ask you, before I let you into this place, where's your ID?
Okay. Excellent.
You can't establish a tenancy. You can't establish
you can't buy
a livelihood.
Land.
You can't buy land. You can't
acquire assets.
You can't acquire assets. You can't start your life. Yeah.
I wanted to move to the last segment of our conversation, and just because of your rich experience in human rights, and I guess in development as well, what do you feel for you are... Okay, we are in a new space right now, I guess, with the executive orders of the USA that has started a whole snowballing effect around, foreign aid and limitations of that. And maybe just your reflections in this period around the role of international aid. And for you, what do you feel is the future? The future of human rights, but also the future of this, support that we've been receiving from foreign agencies, and where we need to be now as a country, what we need to be looking into as actors in this space, but also generally as those who've benefited from this support.
I think there are many questions that are raised by the current the ongoing development since Trump got back to power last month. So we've had going back to the period after the fall of the Berlin Wall, for example. If you go back to that period, for example, there was a very robust and very aggressive investment by Western powers in the pro-democracy movements of third world countries, including African countries, that had a big effect in Central and Eastern Europe in supporting the color revolutions. In Africa, it also had an effect. It supported the sort of a quick establishment of of some kind of forms of democracy that included elections that saw ruling parties or independence parties falling from power, as happened, for example, in countries like Zambia and so on. So then there was later on a pushback against that, because African governments felt that if you support pro-democracy movements, it amounts to interference with internal affairs of our countries. But there was also an assumption, I think, that the democratic experience is it moves in one direction. People start with illiberal societies, and if they work on it with support from foreigners, but also local groups, including their money and so on and so forth, then you establish liberal societies. And that process it moves only in one direction. Once you have elections and democracy and so on and so forth, then the assumption was that there can be no reversals. We've had, I think, long enough an experience to now understand that societies are a lot more complex. They don't move only in one direction. You've had these ingrained dictatorships like we've had in, say, Somalia during Siad Barre. Libya was ultimately also a dictatorship. When those dictatorships have fallen, what resulted from that was not democracy, but anarchy.
Yes.
So dictatorship is bad, but it's not necessarily the worst that can happen, because you also can have anarchical societies, as we've had transformations from dictatorships to anarchy in a lot of situations. But also you've had societies that move in the trajectory of democracy, but also experience massive reversals in the democratic gains. So it is a lot more complicated. So one of the effects it has had is it has discouraged the enterprise of foreign funding for that promote the democracy, because I think a realization that this thing is much more difficult to achieve than was first thought. The second fact, obviously, is to do with the fact that the economies of those countries that were giving aid and but also giving international support to democratic movements in the global south, the economies are not doing as well for a set of complex reasons. But there's also the rise of new global actors like China, India, Turkey, and so on and so forth, that are scrambling for resources, control, and a say in the affairs of third world countries, African countries, and they don't ask the same questions. So these are the traditional democratic partners are feeling that if they do business the same way, they're disadvantaging themselves. So those are some of the factors that I think account for the pushback that we have seen. So what does that mean for us? I think it means that we should take what support we have received as the global south for what it was able to do, and new alternatives have got to be found. People have got to look for alternatives. How do they get on with their lives without the dependencies that have been created? But inherent in that is also conversations that are needed around the reform of international financial institutions.
Absolutely.
Because when you receive foreign aid from the United States, it's dollars. They print them and give them to you, and they are valuable to us because when we are armed with them, we can buy oil, we can do all the imports that the country needs, and we can stabilize our shilling and so on and so forth. what for them it's just a printing thing, just printouts of pieces of paper that give us value. But what do they do for them to, what do they get in return? The US economy is upheld by the fact that they can get the goods and services of other countries in exchange for pieces of paper.
Yes.
And that is based on the privilege that the US dollar as a global currency has, and that is the privilege that enables them, on the one hand, to keep giving aid, which is a small portion of whatever it is that they receive in return for really no or very little investment. So questions to do with what are alternatives, what alternative arrangements are possible and necessary, and backing up the position of the US is obviously the Bretton Woods institutions.
Yes.
So a reform of the global financial architecture. So the ending of foreign aid is fine, so long as it is backed with a serious commitment to reforming the global financial architecture, because it unfairly disadvantages the global South, and puts us in this situation where it becomes necessary for us to seek and expect handouts from the global North.
Thank you so much. And that's such an important point. And I think there's been conversations on how to actually reform the global financial architecture. And I think countries from the global South are now, speaking more about how that needs to look like. And there's a recent vote, I think, in the UN for the formation of a UN tax body. And I think that's like one of the big milestones, because that was completely unexpected, it's one of the times where the global South countries really came together to ensure that is pushed, because part of the global, financial architecture is the tax systems. It's ensuring that, we don't have illicit financial flows. Is that, if you come and invest in my country, you should be able to pay taxes in my country because you're using my resources.
Exactly.
Right. And that, there's fair distribution, and that, we are recognizing the contribution, and the resources that are there in Africa, and that there are those from the global North who are benefiting from these resources. And so some of those should also benefit the communities and the people in the countries in which they take them. So thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing. I'm really, really happy, and I'm really proud that we live in a country actually that people can be brave to make brave decisions that are for the good of the people. Because sometimes those stories of brave decisions by governments and by presidents sometimes don't come to the fore. And it's really just such a privilege to be able to hear this. And I think it'll be such a privilege and an honor for many people to have access to this information. And thank you for making time to come and talk to me.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for having me. And I wish you all the success in the project you're involved in. It is important for the country that the stories of ordinary people are told, and the inspiration that they can possibly have would be something that the country, I think, needs to experience.
Especially
Thank you
at
so
this
much.
time. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Okay.